Hello, in this video, I'm going to take you towards the journey of Agile Project Management. You see, we hear a lot of concepts about Agile, but I believe when we talk about Agile, or the way or the concept behind Agile was how we are going to manage Agile project, or you can say manage the IT software development projects by understanding three different uncertainties. Uncertainty of a scope, that scope will vary. We don't know exactly what are the functions and features we are going to develop. The second is technology may behave in a different way, or maybe technology is not as mature as we think. So we may have some uncertainty in terms of technology adoption or technology results. And third, and very interesting part is that the team that we are basically using to develop the uncertain project within an uncertain technology, they will be learning and practicing multiple aspects of development and understanding the scope and learning the technology, understanding the business environment, and most of all understanding the changing dynamics of requirement and responding to that. So with that perspective, we talk about how we lead a project which will have these three uncertainties to deal with. But another important aspect that we need to look into it when we talk about Agile is that right now, when you look at organizations, so organizations are struggling for sustainability and they are struggling for growth. So typically, when we look back, especially HBR research data that in 1969-70, when we start a company, a typical company lasts for 75 years. But now, if you look at the average year of a company, or you can say the average time an organization will last is less than 5 years. So that's very typical that how we are going to build product and services that are going to appeal the customers so that we can make money. And on the other hand, how we are going to continuously engage our customers. When I talk about my first session in Agile Project Management, we call it navigate the business environment. So when we understand the business environment, businesses talk about three types of product or services that they are offering. One type of service is core business. Core business means what they are doing right now or how they are earning money right now. So let's suppose an electricity company is doing generation, transmission and distribution so that they can provide electricity to the residents and to the commercial environment, and they earn money by distributing the electricity. On the other hand, if you look at the banks, they are providing you secure wallets, secure environment where you can keep your money and do transactions. So that's their overall business. If you talk about the telecom organization, they are providing you connectivity so that you can connect to other people, talk to them and browse internet. Same way, if you talk about an insurance company ensures that whatever insurance you got, that should be responded in the case of any eventuality, and they will manage that is the claim is right or wrong, and then process the claim. If you talk about a hospital, so hospital provides healthcare services and they need to ensure that whatever healthcare services you are going to get from the hospital, they are smooth and effective. If you look at any organization, they are running their businesses based on their core service or core product. But at the same time, if you talk about right now, if you talk about today's business environment, disruption is in the air. Uncertainty is the new certainty that we need to deal with. In that perspective, organization management, top management, or you can say C-level, they have to become a juggler in a way that how they continuously improve their current business, how they continuously improve their core business, and at the same time, they build the new business so that they should not be disrupted. They should be the disruptor instead of disrupted. So if I understand, if we understand that paradigm, if you understand that whole perspective, so it's very important to understand that now organization needs to do multiple initiatives, and these initiatives are going to help them to improve their current business, to improve their core business, so that they can exploit more value, more return, more profitability. On the other hand, they need to build the new business, so that if their business, their core business is no more valid, is no more giving them the value, they are ready with the new products and services. So that's how we talk about navigating the business environment or becoming a true ambidextrous organization. When we understand that thing, we need to understand that now project economy has been risen. When you talk about project economy, it means that previously we were living in an industrialization era. Industrialization era is all about operations management. It's all about efficiency, doing one thing again and again and again, so that we have less error, high quality and repeatability. But now if you look at the market size, you need to talk about new products, new services, and the average product life cycle. Traditionally product life cycle, say for a car manufacturing, the average new product comes in after 8 years. Now it is coming in every 4 years. So you can see it's half or maybe less than half. So if you look at that perspective, organization needs to do multiple initiatives. So it's no longer a core competency of an organization that they should rely only on operations. They also need to rely on projects, or you can say project management. So that is why there is a data, it says that project economy is here. And when you talk about project economy, organization needs to execute or run multiple projects. Couple of projects, a couple of initiatives will help you to enhance or increase the efficiency of the core business, or build the capability or new capability, or build the extra capability for the company to deal with the future growth. On the other hand, if you look at the marketing, if you look at the new technology, if you talk about fourth industrial revolution, in that perspective, we need to adopt these technologies. And we are not only adopting these technologies to build something new. We can use these technologies to enhance our core services. We can use these technologies to enhance the customer experience, to increase our quality, to decrease our operational time. So these are the parameters that we need to look into. But how these technologies are going to be utilized, what would be the real value that we are going to get, it's the question mark. So when I talk about agile project management, I generally say that we need to see how, as an organization, we can use these fourth industrial revolution technologies, like I talk about AI, blockchain, big data. So these technologies basically help you to reduce your product delivery time. It helps you to increase your productivity. It helps you to engage your customers. So these are the typical factors that we can use when we talk about fourth industrial revolution technologies. So it's not necessary that we are using them only for building something new or for transforming the market. Maybe we are using them to enhance or transform or to build our core services, whatever we are doing. So let's suppose we are into training company, we are into you can say coaching and consulting, but from the operational perspective, we need to continuously market our services, engage new customers, sell our courses. So we have a CRM. So everybody has a CRM. Now I am on a path to develop a CRM which can use artificial intelligence to generate customer based messaging system. Right now I write a copy email and we send this email to everybody. Maybe we have 1 or 2 emails that we send to everybody, and then our prospective customer goes through multiple stages of selling. Maybe they are saying that we got to know the product, we are looking into it. Maybe they are saying that we are interested in your product, but we want to see about the pricing factor. Maybe we want to do it but not now. So number one is that what should be the message that we engage their attention, we become their preferred choice, and what should be the message that we should send them into multiple stages of sales. And if AI can help me leverage this thing with my CRM, then nothing like it, because it will help me to sell more and increase the business value of my company. But I'm not building a new company, I am utilizing or doing the same business but utilizing the AI technology. So mostly when I talk about agile, I say how can we use these fourth industrial revolution technologies or 4I technologies to increase our core business value. We can of course do and use these technologies to build some transformative business, to build new model, but here I am talking about how do we use them for our core business. Another important thing is that when we talk about the agility has two meanings in terms of organization agility and project agility. When you talk about organizational agility, it means how quickly management is making a decision, how quickly we are reassigning, redeveloping our resources across project. But when you talk about the agility in a project, it means how quickly we or how frequently we are delivering the results to the customer, and more importantly, how we are receptive towards change management. So these are the factors that we need to understand when we are going to adopt the agile project management to navigate the business environment. The second important aspect that we talk about is what is the agile mindset. Most of the time when people talk about agile, we talk about Scrum, we talk about XP, but actually, I have seen sometimes people are comparing Agile versus Scrum or Agile versus XP. And I used to say that, see, Agile is a terminology, or I must say Agile is an umbrella terminology, which means Scrum, XP, Lean, Kanban, ASD, AUP. So whatever Agile methodology you are using, that comes under the agile word or agile concept. So technically when you talk about agile mindset has three things. One is agile values, which are 4. The second is agile principles, which are 12. And then we have multiple, I must say, agile practices. So when I talk about agile manifesto or agile principle, that was initially written in February 2001 by 17 top gurus of software development, and they talked about that the way we do traditional project, engineering project, consulting contracting projects, or you can say construction projects, it's not the same way we do the IT or software development projects. So in that perspective, when we need to look into the overall development, we need to change the way we do these projects. And to change that way, first of all, we need to talk about values that everybody should understand and adhere to. So first value is, rather than following the processes and tools, we should talk about each other. So you can say that's constant communication and conversation over processes and tools. So they're not saying that we should not do or not use process and tools, but we should focus on interactions and communication. Same way, when we talk about agile principle, the second important element is that how we are going to respond the change versus following the plan. So whenever customer has some change, we need to respond to that rather than saying that it is not going to happen or we are not going to work on it. Same way, when we look at the further concepts of agile valued, it says that we need to collaborate with customer rather than negotiate the contract. So you see, it's more about that how we are interacting with the customers, how we are engaging with the team. And finally, if you look at it, it's basically that the way we measure the product is the working software rather than lot of documents. So working software over comprehensive documentation. So you see, these are the core 4 principles that everybody needs to understand, and based on these principles based on these 4 values, we have 12 principles. So one of the principle is working software, frequent delivery, customer collaboration, sustainable pace. So these are a couple of principles that we need to understand when we are talking about or adopting the agile project management. Interestingly, when we see the agile project management, we need to understand the overall agile whole process. So agile process works on by fixing the iteration. In some agile practices, we call it iteration. In some agile practices, we call it sprint, right? Like in Scrum. So when I talk about an iteration, one of the key point is that any practice that we are going to use for Agile, it is actually a time box events, or it is actually based on a specific time. Because typically when you look at the traditional projects, you talk about fixing the scope, or I must say freezing the scope at the start of the project. But when you talk about an agile project, you focus on freezing the time. So in that perspective, if I look at the iteration, or if I look at the sprint size is recommended to between 2 to 4 weeks or 1 to 4 weeks. So let's suppose if I am going to do agile project management by using the extreme programming agile practice, then it will say 1 to 4 weeks. But if I am going to do agile by using the Scrum practice, it will say 2 to 4 weeks. So you can understand that the maximum size of or duration of an iteration is 4 weeks or 1 month. So we are not going beyond 1 month. Why not beyond 1 month? Because if anything goes wrong, the maximum waste we will have, the maximum rework that we need to do is a 1 month rework. And we need to see how we are going to make a decision about the duration of an agile. In terms of the iteration, I can say that the main backbone of agile project management is iteration itself, whose duration is 1 to 4 weeks. The next, if I look at the iteration, I would say we have 4 core events or ceremonies that we need to understand. When we start an agile project, or when we start the agile iteration, or we call it a sprint, the first meeting, the first interaction in an agile sprint is iteration planning meeting. Iteration planning meeting is a time on day 1 where the product owner or a customer talks about the product itself, and then team decides what work they can take on in this sprint to deliver. Ideally, the duration of the iteration planning meeting is 2 hours per week iteration. So let's suppose if I have 1 week iteration, then the iteration planning meeting is 2 weeks. If I have 2 hours, if I have 2 week iteration, then the iteration planning meeting is 4 hours. If I have 3 week iteration, then I will have 6 hours of iteration planning. If I have 4 weeks of iteration, then I will have 8 hours of iteration planning meeting. And that meeting is divided into 2 parts. First part, where the product owner or the customer is going to talk about the features, functions that we are supposed to deliver. And the other part is where team is going to take on the prioritized stories and features, and then decompose them into tasks and assign to each other. The second type of meeting is referred as daily stand-up meeting. Daily stand-up meeting is planned as 15 minutes on daily basis. So you can say that we will do daily stand-up from day 2 till day 9. Every day, same time, same location, all the team members will be standing up, and they are only giving up 3 information: what we have done yesterday, what we are going to do today, and what are the impediments we are facing. Interestingly, during that 15-minute meeting, nobody is going to talk about how to resolve the impediments, how to interact with each other, how do you solve this problem. No, it's just an information meeting. After that meeting, the problem or impediments will be discussed or resolved, after that meeting. Then the third meeting or third event in Agile Project Management is going to happen on, let's suppose if I have a 2-week iteration, that is going to happen on the 10th day. And that is iteration review or a sprint review. In that meeting, my team will showcase the work that they have done to the customer or product owner, and they will accept or reject or recommend any changes based on their work. So that's a meeting which is going to be conducted on the last day of iteration, or you can say if we have a 2-week iteration, then it is going to happen on 10th day. After the sprint review, we have a sprint retrospective meeting. A sprint retrospective meeting is actually a 45 minutes meeting based on per week iteration. So if I have 1 week iteration, it is going to be 45 minutes. If I have a 2 week iteration, it is going to be 1 hour 30 minutes. If I have 4 week iteration, then it is going to be 3 hour sprint retrospective meeting. And in that meeting, we review what we have done, what problem we face, how we can rectify the problem, how we are going to run the iteration in next iteration in a better way or in a more effective way. So first is iteration. The second thing is the 4 events and meetings that we are going to conduct during the iteration. Third important element is the number of roles in Agile projects. So generally, if I look at 2 common Agile practices, one is XP and the other one is Scrum. So Scrum has 3 roles: Scrum Master, Product Owner and Development Team. Product owner is the one who perform like a project sponsor, whose job is to capture the requirement from the stakeholders, define the requirement or present the requirement to the team, prioritize the requirement and review the overall product. Team is the one who is going to estimate the requirements, decompose the requirement to tasks, assign the tasks to each other and deliver the work. The Scrum Master is the one whose job is to make sure that the team is following the Agile, mentor and coach the team and see how to resolve the impediments that team is facing. So you can say that the Scrum Master is the process owner and product owner is the product owner. That's we talk about it. And development team is the team who is delivering the product. When we understand these 3 roles from a Scrum perspective, in the context of XP, we don't have product owner, we call it the customer. That customer is sitting with us and they are interacting with us on a regular basis. Then we have coach, which is the replacement of Scrum Master and team. So that's how we talk about the overall perspective. But interestingly, in XP, team has further decomposed as developer and the tester. But if you look at the Scrum, we have only development team. Once we understand the iteration as the core perspective, then the 4 events around the iteration, then the 3 or 4 roles based on the Agile practice we are using. Finally, we have 6 important documents that we need to manage. The first document is, you can say, your product backlog. Product backlog is a document which contains all the requirements, all the functionalities that we are going to develop, all the risk and issues that we are going to resolve in a project, and any change that has basically requested by the customer, or maybe the change comes because of some work that we need to update. Then the next important document here is a sprint backlog or iteration backlog. You can say that the sprint or iteration backlog is the subset of product backlog that we are going to deliver in one iteration. So whatever we are going to deliver throughout the product is the product backlog, and whatever we are going to deliver in one iteration is referred as the sprint backlog. Then we can also develop a release plan. Sometime when we talk about the extreme programming or we are developing in a product, so we can say that we have one release. Within one release, we have multiple iterations. So a project can have 2 or 3 or 4 releases, and one release will have 2 or 3 or 4 iterations. Generally, if you talk about Scrum says that every iteration or every sprint is releasable. But when you talk about an XP, it says that the iteration size is 1 to 4 weeks, and release size is 1 month to 6 months, or you can say 30 days to 180 days. Within that 180 days or whatever number of days we are keeping for the release time, we can have 3 or 4 or 5 iterations. And ideally, after each iteration, we are getting the acceptance from the customer, but we are not making the product available for customer to use. So customer will be getting the product in a live environment after the release, not after each iteration. So that's how we call it increment. Increment means what we have done, what is going to be available to customer to use. Another important, I must say, document that we talk about here is the impediment list. So when you talk about an impediment list, it means any problem, any issue that your team is facing. So these impediment lists will help Scrum Master to resolve the issues which a team is facing. So we have product backlog, we have iteration backlog, we have release plan, we have impediment list, we have increment, and finally the way we monitor and control the project is through burn down charts or burn up charts or velocity charts. So these are the charts or these are the documents that we can use to measure the performance of the team or the performance of the product. So these are the 6 key documents that we develop during the project. So when you talk about the product backlog and release plan, that is the responsibility of the product owner. When you talk about the sprint backlog, that is the responsibility of the team. When you talk about the, you can say, impediment list, burn down chart, velocity chart, this is the responsibility of the Scrum Master. Increment is all about what we have developed as far as the product is concerned through the team perspective. So that's how we see multiple different tools, or you can say templates, that we can use to work in Agile project with the responsibilities. Once we understand the concept of Agile Manifesto, which are 4 values, Agile principles and Agile process, it's easy to understand that how we are going to use the Agile for our project. When we talk about utilizing the Agile, we have multiple practices. So when we go on the job of doing the project, or especially saying that we are going to do an Agile project, we need to understand why this project has been initiated, right? So we need to understand the business need of a project. We are not doing project just to adopt artificial intelligence or try blockchain or implement, IoT. No, it's not like this, right? The major point is that it is going to help us increase more customer base, decrease the problem, decrease the processing time. So these are the reasons that we are going to look into it. So first of all, we need to understand what is the business need that we are going to handle. And then we need to develop a charter, or you can say product vision box, or we can talk about an elevator pitch, or maybe tweeting. So these are the typical options that we can use to initiate a project, or I must say these are the templates or documents that we can use to initiate an Agile project. When you talk about a Agile project initiation, I must say one of my favorite tool or document is elevator pitch. Elevator pitch helps you to define your project within 1 minute, right? And the format is for whom we are doing this project, what are their problems. So you can say, let's suppose for mid-career professionals who wants to adopt Agile project management, the product. So the Agile project management is an online live or face-to-face workshop that provides ABCD features. Unlike our competitors, we have these competitive advantage. So you can say, for customer, the product is a type of a product that provide ABCD features. Unlike competitor, we have these competitive advantage. So you can say these are the 5 elements that we can define within 1 minute for our elevator pitch. Or maybe we can use product vision box or product vision board. It's up to you that how you are initiating the Agile project. But interestingly, when you're talking about initiating an Agile project and you have identified the project and the team, right? Then it's time to talk about which Agile project lifecycle or which Agile practice we are going to adopt. Generally, we have multiple practices like extreme programming, like XP, like Lean, Kanban, DSDM, ASD, AUP, Crystal. So these are multiple practices. So we need to understand how do we use these practices, or how do we combine these practices to build our own practice and see it. Ideally, when you talk about, say, the duration of the size of an iteration, the point is that in Scrum it's 2 to 4 weeks, but in XP it is 1 to 4 weeks. But I believe, when we talk about Agile, by looking at the change, by looking at dealing with the uncertainty, so ideally in the context of Scrum, once we commit, let's say, a 2-week iteration, we cannot add more work within that iteration. Once we said that we are going to do the job within 2 weeks, we are going to do the job. That's it. No any extra requirement will be added within that 2 weeks. So you can say that any change that you want will go to the product backlog, and based on their priority it will be done or it will be decided at the start of any iteration. But we are not going to do or accept within the iteration. That is how we define the Scrum or change in Scrum. But if we talk about XP in the context of extreme programming, whenever there is a new change, we stop the current iteration or close the current iteration and start the new iteration with the change. But if you talk about the DSDM, Dynamic System Development Method, another agile practice, whenever we have a change, we can accept that change within an iteration, but by pre-prioritizing the overall, you can say, concept or an overall number of features. So if my team capacity is to handle, say, 5 stories, which is totaling to 80 story points, 25 story points, so I cannot go beyond 25 story points. I will add one new story based on the priority and remove some stories which is almost equal to the same story. So that's how we deal the business priority within the iteration. Sometimes we can also manage the change during the overall release, but that is also outside the iteration. So we need to see how we are dealing the change within an iteration, and based on that we can select the agile practice. So once we understood that what is our agile practice, we can also talk about multiple aspects. One of the aspect is that how do you use agile contracts, because mostly we don't talk about contract, we don't talk about procurement in agile. The way we do procurement in traditional projects is not the way we do in agile, because when you talk about traditional project, mostly we think about fixed price contract, because our main purpose is to fix the scope during the project, or we do the project by defining the contract in detail. So that's how we do the traditional project or waterfall project. But when you talk about agile, the underlying concept is that we understand that we will have uncertainty of scope, uncertainty of technology, and based on that we can look for it. So traditional project procurements are fixed price contract, cost reimbursable contract, and time and material contract, and we manage the risk of buyer and supplier accordingly. But when you talk about an agile project, according to some research and data, 70% of agile contracts are being done as time and material, because we can say that we are going to do that much work based on that much time, but if it is not going to be done, we are not responsible as a supplier. So we can sell you either number of iteration or either number of working hours, or you can say whatever rate we are looking for the individual team player, and saying that these are the team rates and we are doing the resourcing augmentation. But ideally we can look for other options too. One of the option is graduated fixed price. Graduated fixed price means that if you are going to achieve the result before time, you will get say $120 or $40 per hour. If you are going to achieve the target within the stated time, you are going to get say $110. And if you are going to achieve the target in extended time, so you will get around $90 per hour. So that way, you can talk about the overall managing the risk of buyer and seller. You can also talk about velocity-based selling. You can also talk about sprint-based contracting. So you need to see what type of a contract you have, and based on that contract, you can also choose the project lifecycle. I would say when we are going to do the contracting in Agile, we need to see the understanding of both the buyer and supplier, and understanding of the overall business need, and more importantly, what is the role of a product owner and availability of a customer. Because another interesting type of a contract is a change for free and money for nothing. It's very interesting to look into it. When we say change for free and money for nothing, it means that if any change occurs, right, we will do that change, but we need to reduce the same amount of content or same amount of stories that we have agreed initially. So we thought that we will do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H functionalities, but as you have new functionality, let's suppose X or Z came in, so we will take out probably G or H from the overall scope. So you can change until unless the overall the velocity is same or different, and we can take it out. And then if you are reducing the project, so it's up to you that you can say that whatever we thought of and we plan to do the project in 10 iterations, now 7 or 8 iterations are good to go. So whatever iterations you are not continuing, you will pay only 20% of the work, and you move, or 20% of the cost of the not committing the committed iterations, and then do the things. So that's how we can see money for nothing and change for free contract type. So it's very interesting to see how we are trying to balance the risk between buyer and supplier in the contracting model. Once you understand that thing, you will be able to decide or design the agile project lifecycle. In this context, one of the key elements that we need to understand is that we have typically two different types of agile. One, I call them as iteration based agile, and the other one is release based agile. When we talk about iteration based agile, it means that once your team is going to showcase the product or feature or stories that they develop in one iteration and customer accepted them, then you are going to deploy it and customer will be able to use it now. But when you talk about a release-based iteration, you are going to get acceptance of the deliverables or stories, but you are not going to make it deployable or make it available now. It will be available after the release. So that's how we talk about the overall perspective of iteration-based agile versus the release-based agile. And that's how we can do the selection of right agile methodology. Next, when we talk about capturing the requirement in an agile project, we don't talk about, because if you look at the traditional project, we have business case, feasibility study, statement of work, business vision document, business requirement document, then project charter, then requirement document, then requirement receivable document, then scope statement. In IT, we have functional requirement document or software requirement specification. So we have plenty of documents that we can think of and talk about it. But here, when you talk about doing the agile or capturing the requirement, you capture all of the requirements in one document, that is your product backlog. And when we are capturing the requirement, generally we have three options to look for. One is feature list, second is use cases, and third one is user stories. User stories were actually being used in extreme programming, but they are good to go because that will help us to understand the customer requirements in a more conservative way, in more conversation style way. So generally when we talk about the story, it's like, as a user, I want this work so that I can achieve this. So technically you can use this template, or maybe you can use other template to write down the story. Story helps to understand the perspective of customer. Story helps to understand how we are going to deliver the overall story. Another important thing is that when we talk about story, we use 3C format. 3C means the card on which we are going to write the story. Second is conversation, like as a let's suppose as a trainer, I want to upload my content so that my customers or my teacher students will be able to access them. So that is the conversation that I'm talking about, the story. And finally, the confirmation, that how we are going to accept the story. So videos are available after the deployment. Customer can view the video, customer can tag the video, customer will say report the video completion. So these are the confirmation that we can look at it from the acceptance perspective. Sometimes we can also talk about technical acceptance in terms of the video size, in terms of the video quality. So that's how we talk about the 3 C's of story. When we talk about a story, generally we talk about stories as two: epic and story. Epic is ideally a story which is a big enough story that we cannot deliver in one iteration. So if that story is big, or if it is a big story, we call it epic, and we need to decompose that story. When we are decomposing the story, we are using either decomposition across data or across operations boundary. When I say across data, it means I want to see my student list who passed the PMP, or I want to know the student list who did not attempted the PMP. So that is the database decomposition. But when I talk about the operation boundary, it means I want to add students, I want to edit the status of a student, I want to delete the student. So that is the decomposition of stories across the operations. Another important thing is that we can use the story map. Story map is like a product roadmap where we can see that what are the key skeleton that we need to look into it. So if I talk about a website where I can buy books, I would say I need to search the books, I need to order the books, I need to pay for the book, and I need to choose for the delivery. So these are the the key backbone that I need to look into it. And then we have additional features that we can look for when we talk about the overall perspective of the overall story. Regarding the use stories or use case and user stories, I would say one of the key element is story mapping. Story mapping is like a product roadmap, and it helps to see how we are going to process the overall project. In fact, story map will also help you to finalize the minimum viable product. So you can define that what we are going to release in our release 1. Typically, when you talk about the story map, it has backbone, walking skeleton, and additional feature. Backbone is like the process flow. So let's suppose if we talk about an e-commerce website where I can buy books, I would say as a user, I can search books, I can add to shopping cart, I can pay for it, and I can choose for the delivery. That is the backbone. When I talk about search, I can say search through author name, search through a book name, right? And if I talk about the additional feature, I can go about search through ISBN, search through top 5 books. When I talk about add to cart, I can say add to cart or update my cart or save for later. So these could be the option. Same when I talk about the payment, I can say pay through card, pay through PayPal, right? So these are the options that I can look into it. And then finally choose delivery or select your address or save your address. But when I'm talking about release 1 or minimum viable product, maybe I will have few features in each category, but the backbone will remain same. So that's how we talk about the decomposing the overall scope based on MVP or based on how much stories we can take on in one iteration. Interestingly, when you talk about the concept of estimation in Agile, it is totally different. When we talk about traditional project management, we talk about absolute numbers, and we talk about absoluteness. So let's suppose the work package or WPS will be decomposed into activities, and we talk about activities in terms of 8x80 rule. That activity will be able to complete in around 8 hours and maximum 80 hours. And we know that how much time it is going to take to complete an activity or to complete the whole work package by estimating the individual activities. But here, when we talk about the project, we don't talk about absolute measure, we talk about the relative measure. Relative measure means that we are forecasting, we are speculating, we are not saying that we are sure that we can look into it. That is the first thing. Second thing, in the context of the agile estimation, is that which method we are using. So generally we don't talk about the hours, we talk about either story point or ideal days. Ideal day means when I'm going to perform a work without any disruption or without going into any other activity. So it's easier to talk about ideal days, but somehow ideal days varies customer to customer, ideal days varies user to user or developer to developer experience. But the other way is, which initially took time to get to know and explain, is story point. So story point or one story point, first of all, we need to define its measure. So let's suppose I would say one story point is a time that I will be able to write down one web page with 3 text boxes and 2 buttons. That is one story point reference, and I can set any story point reference that I want to do. So first of all, we need to choose that we are using story point or we are using ideal days. When we have defined that thing, then the next important element is that what is the definition of done for the team. So definition of done can be, as a team, I will be able to analyze the story, design the story, develop the story, test the story, or it could be that I will be able to write the documentation of the story. So we need to see what is the definition of done, and we don't change definition of done throughout the project. Once we define the estimation method, story point or ideal day, and set the story point reference. Let's suppose we are discussing story points and we talk about a lot of story points. So we set a story point, we set the story reference, then we define the definition of done. Once we have definition of done, then team will talk about that how many story points they are going to take to develop one story as per definition of done. So technically, I would say that I have 25 stories. So these 25 stories will take, say, 100 story points. So one story is taking 2 story points, the other is taking 5 story points, the other one is taking 13 story points, or 21 story points, or 2 story points. So basically, we are not talking about the scope here. We are not talking about how many stories we are going to run or execute or develop in each iteration. We are talking about how many story points as a team we can manage in one iteration. So first of all, if I'm going to recap is that, first of all, I'm going to know what estimation method we are using, story point or ideal days. Let's say story point. What is the one story point equivalent to? So set the reference of story point. Number 3, what is our definition of done? Then number 4, how many story points one story will take to complete based on definition done. When we talk about setting the story points, we generally use Fibonacci method. Fibonacci help us to get more relative confidence. So here 1:1, 2, or so basically the options or the numbers that we are going to use for story points are 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. So these are the options that we have when we talk about the setting the story point estimations or setting the story points for each story. Then when we talk about calculating the story points, we can use multiple methods. One method could be triangulation method. One method could be the planning poker, right? One method could be wide band Delphi. So we can use multiple methods to estimate the story. Planning poker is the method which actually gives you the more accurate stories when you are doing the story estimation with the team. In planning poker, product owner talks about the detail of the stories and team estimates the story. And then if they have a difference, like say one team member is saying 3 story points and the other one is saying 8 or 13 story points, then we reassess the story, we rediscuss the story and redo the planning poker game. Based on that thing, we come up to the more accurate or more relative estimation of our story. So at the end of the day, we know that what are stories in our product backlog. So let's suppose we have more than say 25, 2800 stories, and then we got to know that how many story points we have. So we need to see 2 things closely. One, number of stories, and number 2 is the number of story points. Then another important element is what is my team velocity. Team velocity means how many story points a team can perform in one iteration. So let's suppose we have a 2-week iteration and I have 5 team members. So these 5 team members can manage say 40 story points in each iteration. So that's how we are going to talk about the overall story. So let's suppose I have 25 stories in my product backlog. I have 200 story points. My team has 40 story point velocity per 2-week iteration. So how many iterations I need to complete the project? That is the interesting thing. So here I can say if I go by the absolute 40, we need 5 story points to complete the 200 story points stories. So that's how we do the calculation. When we talk about the concept of stories, we try to keep, let's suppose if my team velocity is 40, so I need to have around 34, 35, 36, 38 story points in my one iteration, so I can manage any buffer or any issue that we need to look into it. Once we understand that how we estimate the agile project, how we got to know number of iterations that we need in a project or the release in this project, then the next important thing is to identify what are our project risks. Generally, one of the risks in Agile project is productivity variation. Means that maybe in one iteration my team velocity is 40, in next iteration my team velocity is 30, and then 32, then 25, then 40. So we need to see why we are having these productivity variation. Another, I would say, the risk that we which we can have in our Agile project is, you can say, feature creep, or you can say scope creep. So we are trying to add a lot of data, or we are trying to add or provide gold plating which is not required. So we need to see how we are going to look into it. Another interesting element would be in the context of the risk is the personnel loss, that the 5 team members all are not available, or maybe some are being moved out from the project, or maybe some people came into the project. So it's not something that we do in Agile. When we talk about doing the Agile with Agile mindset, we have the fixed team throughout the project, or at least throughout the iteration. Then another important element could be that when we look at the risk is that our specifications was not correct, or we did not talk about the entire detail of the story. That is going to change the overall execution of the delivery or of the user story within an iteration. Then we can also have, you can say, wrong estimates. So we thought that this story will take 5 story points, but it is taking more than the 5 story points. So we can need to look into it, that what are our risks and how we are going to address the risk. Generally, when we develop a product backlog, we can also see the risk adjusted product backlog. As I said earlier, that when we talk about the product backlog, it contains stories, it contains risks, it contains issues or bug lists, and it also contains the change. When I say the risk adjusted backlog, we generally calculate the expected monetary value of risk and add into the product backlog. So let's suppose one story is taking, say, 10 story point, which actually come into as $10,000. Then we have another story which is going to take $5,000. Then we have a risk which is going to happen, and it's the expected monetary value of the risk is $7,000. So when I say risk adjusted backlog, so the top priority based on cost would be $10,000, then the risk of $7,000, then a story of $5,000. So that's how we develop a risk adjusted backlog. Another key component that we need to look into it when we talk about Agile is the test first development, because in terms of the quality, as we start the Agile movement from the IT perspective, so what we do is that rather than writing the code first, we write the test first, and we see that what is the result of our test. So basically, write the test, let the test fail, write the code, let the test the code, and then refactor. So you can say that test, code, and refactor. So that's how we can talk about it. So based on these things, we need to look into it, that how we are developing the product. And typically we talk about test driven development as a whole. We can also use other methods like behavior driven development. In the context of behavior driven development, we see that how this product is behaving in multiple environments. So when I talk about codes, we say that let's suppose we need to build a very basic function, add 2 numbers. When I say add 2 numbers, so let's suppose 2 plus 2 numbers should come 4. So if 2 plus 2 is not coming 4, it means we have some formula issue, we have some calculation issue. So that is the point of view of test driven development, where we are checking the code. It's more like unit testing. But when I say that 2 plus 2, 4 is coming good in my Windows environment, but 2 plus 2, 4 is not coming in my, say, iOS environment. So this is a different behavior in different environment. Then we have acceptance test driven development, ATDD. In the context of acceptance test driven development, we need to see what are the inputs. So maybe 2 plus 2 is 4, but what about A plus 2? So A plus 2 is not going to work. So we need to see how we are going to see the requirements in different perspectives, how we are going to take the testing. So these are the elements that we need to look into it when we are developing the overall product during utilizing the Agile mindset and seeing what are the key elements. Once we understand that we are capturing the requirement through user stories, we are estimating the agile duration through story points, we are understanding the buffers through risk management, and we are making sure the quality through test first development. Now it's time to lead the team and measure the overall performance of agile project. When we talk about leadership challenges, it's very high, because when you talk about traditional project, it's about engaging the customer, navigating the complexity. But here we talk about triple uncertainties, means how we are going to address the changing requirements or unclear requirements, and we are starting the project with that mindset. Second is technology is uncertain. Sometimes it works, sometimes it got stuck. And then the team velocity, variety, or team experience in doing the thing. These are the things needs to manage through the effective leadership. As a leader, I need to see how I am using the adaptive leadership, and I must say how I am using the servant leadership. When I talk about adaptive leadership, it means how quickly we are adjusting our plan, how quickly we are making decisions. And it's not about that all the decisions are going to be right, and to make all the decisions we must have data. We need to make a lot of decisions based on intuition, and lots of time we have no time to make a decision. So we need to see how we are going to work on, based on the available data information, make a decision, and then as we move on, we readjust, recalibrate our decision. And then when you talk about a servant leadership, it means that when we are understanding that we are delivering a project where we have uncertainties, so we need to build the community, provide the psychological safety to the team, that we are experimenting, we are trying innovative ideas, we are trying new things, and we will learn during the process. It's not like that every time when we deliver the feature, when we are going to complete the iteration, we achieve what we have committed for. So that is the main premises when we talk about the agile perspective. And as a Scrum Master, I need to see how I am mentoring my team, coaching my team, and helping them to make their decision. In this perspective, I like the Lisa Atkin book about agile coaching, where she says that whenever you have a problem, you need to take it to the team. Maybe you know the answer, but you need to be let there be a silence, that so that team should be able to identify the problem, and more importantly, let the team fail. If team is having some issues, and the answer, maybe let them try it, let them fail it, so that next time when they will do it better, and they will do based on their learnings rather than the directions. Once we understand the leadership perspective, we also need to understand that in the context of agile, we talk about agile team as cross-functional team, general team, and self-directed team. When I say cross-functional team, it means that we don't talk about specific roles in agile team. We say that we are team and they are cross-functional, and we talk about one of the core principles, which is collective code ownership. So I'm not going to say that this was the responsibility of a design team, or it was the responsibility of the development team, or it was the responsibility of the testing team. It is our responsibility, and we can work on anything it is required. So we are cross-functional, but we are general also. And nobody is going to talk about that A is going to do this job or B is going to do that job, and who is going to do what. That is the team decision. So during the iteration planning meeting, team decides how much work, how many stories, how many story points they can take on, and then they decompose the stories into tasks and assign to each other. So that's how we engage and manage the team. Or as a product owner, my job is to make sure that they got the prioritized stories. As a product owner, my job is to make sure that whenever they have technical requirement, whenever they need clarity of stories, we need to define that stories, and we need to also talk about definition of ready, that what should be available to start working on a story. On the other hand, when we talk about a Scrum Master, he or she needs to take a role of a servant leader, align the team, manage the team, mentor the team, coach the team, so that they can deliver an uncertain project. But when we talk about leading the agile project, we also need to see that during the project we have to anticipate a lot of changes. So to manage change, when you talk about change, change could be, we don't have a scope change, but we have a specification change. Let's suppose 1000 transactions per minute versus 10,000 transactions per minute. So the scope is the same, but the specification has been changed. Maybe we got some new requirements. Maybe we are talking about product where customer said something and my team understood it in different way. So there could be a gulf of evaluation, a gulf of misunderstanding between the customer and the team, and we need to address these things throughout the project. Another important thing is that when we are talking about change could be within iteration, outside iteration, and within release. We need to see how we are doing the change management in iteration based on the life cycle we choose. Finally, when we talk about prioritizing the scope and talking about the change, we need to understand that change is based on Moscow rule. So maybe whenever we have something come in, we can say let's prioritize it. So when we are prioritizing, it's not only change, it's prioritization. So we can use Moscow rule. Moscow means must have, should have, could have, would have. Maybe we can use 100 point, that everyone has a 100 point and they can assign their 100 points out of 100 points based on the top priority items. And maybe we can use a Kano analysis model. So Kano analysis model will help us to identify what are the stories and features which are going to help us to achieve the basic need, and what are the key delighters and wow factors that we can look into it. Ideally, when I talk about a prioritization, in that perspective, the chaos report, it's very interesting when they talk about that 64% of function and features that we develop in an IT project are rarely used or never been used. So why not develop the remaining 36% of the features which are going to be used on a regular basis? So that's very important to see what are our priorities and how we are looking at the change in the overall project. Then the next important element in that perspective is how do we measure the performance of a project? Generally, when you talk about performance, you talk about fixed scope and seeing the time and cost as a variable thing in traditional project. But when you talk about an agile project, you talk about fixed time and scope. You can say inverted triangle, where we're talking about fixed time and cost and then the variable scope. In that perspective, when you talk about the performance, you talk about how do we see how much work is left. And as I said earlier, we don't talk about mainly number of stories, we talk about story points. So in that way, we need to see how many story points we have covered, because there is a possibility that we started our project with 100 story points. During the project, maybe we find out that 100 story points are not the actual requirement. We need to do the same work, same number of stories with 120 story points. Or maybe there is a possibility that we got some new work and now that work will be done with 130 story points. So in that matter, we need to see how many story points left after each iteration. So that is referred as the leading indicator. We are measuring the performance of the project in the perspective of future. Another key important element is that we can use either burn down chart, burn down bar chart, or burn up chart. So these charts will help you to see how many story points we had when we started the project and how many story points we have left after each iteration. And more importantly, it can also show us if there is a change in scope, maybe our scope increase or decrease, how we can respond to them and how my team is performing in each iteration. Another interesting, I must say, a tool that we can use is the velocity chart. How many story points my team is covering in each iteration. So you can say this is my information radiator, where I'm showing my sprint backlog or iteration backlog, that how many stories we take on, where we are right now, what is our team velocity, what is our burn down chart or burn up chart that we are using in our project. Finally, when we talk about agile, we talk about three important aspects, which we call it from the Scrum perspective, empirical process. Means transparency. Anybody can come and see where we are, what is our work, what is our scope, and how we are moving on. Second is inspection. After each iteration, we are going to see what we have done, what are the elements that we need to perform, and we need to adopt it. So transparency, inspection, and adoption are the core pillars of empirical process. To achieve that, in Agile we have Scrum retrospective. So ideally, a Scrum retrospective time is 45 minutes per week iteration. If I have 1 week iteration, it is 45 minutes. 2 week iteration, it's 1 hour 30 minutes, and 4 week iteration is 3 hours. So in that hour, team actually sees what went well, what went wrong, and how can we improve our process for the next iteration. In that perspective, we can use multiple tools, but one of the tool is cumulative flow diagram. Cumulative flow diagram help us to see that how much time it takes one story to convert into analysis or design and development, and how we can improve individual action, individual step in the overall perspective. Then we have value stream mapping tool, which help us to see end-to-end result, that what are the activities which we can eliminate to make the overall work in a more better way, in a more good way. When we talk about looking at the overall perspective, we can talk about lead time and cycle time. Lead time means what is the time that story comes into sprint backlog and release as definition of done or deployed. And cycle time is a time where team starts working on that specific story. So there is a possibility that a story sits in the sprint backlog for first 2 or 3 or 4 days, and then it got a time to go into the analysis, design, and development part. So that's what the cycle time is. Sometime, when you are doing the project, the non-IT people, non-agile people had difficulty to understand the story point. So maybe we can say throughput. So throughput means all about how we are doing number of stories per iteration. That is the only time when we talk about the team velocity in terms of number of stories we are doing. But generally, when we talk about Agile project, we see number of story points we are covering in each project. So it's very important to understand that how we are building the mindset of Agile and executing the Agile by understanding the overall perspective and by understanding the 3 key uncertainties: scope uncertainty, technology uncertainty, and the team capability uncertainty. I hope you enjoyed this breathless video of Agile Project Management, which covers end-to-end Agile implementation. Thank you.